Welcome back to my channel. I'm your host, Steven. We're continuing on with buffet episodes here, looking at the years 1955 onwards. And what we do, we're going to go right to my website and keep reviewing my website there. So what I have here is in 1955, the R13, as is known, was released to the marketplace, the polycylindrical bore clarinet. Now, we know from previous episodes that the R13 name came from previous catalogs, not just the Carl Fisher catalog, but also another catalog I have. Look in my links at the end of this for the 1915 catalog, which had all R numbers for everything in the catalog. Anyways, we reviewed the different model numbers there were. Today's production still consists of things, and even in the early 2000s, the prices I have on the screen right now are from about 2004, I believe, where a B-flat R13 nickel silver keys retailed at $4,600. The silver plated keys retailed at $5,200. Then they had the Greenline models they had, the silver plated ones running $5,200 and the nickel ones at $4,600, the same prices as the regular wood ones. The A models of the R13, silver plated one was at $6,200, the nickel one was at $5,600, and the Greenline was also at $6,200. The E flat R13 silver plated keys was at $6,130. Actually, I have that listed there as 2011 years. So not 2004, but 7 years later, 2011. That was 11 years ago. Anyways, one thing to identify early R13s with, other than a serial number, is that it has a flat spring for the C sharp, G sharp key until supposedly 1970. To some, this provides more smooth key action. This was a preferred method going back to the earlier buffets. We do know, looking at the previous episodes, that flat springs were easier to install. And a flat spring, you screw a screw through it onto the back of the key. You grind and polish off the top of the key. That's a little circle we have. Just look at my previous episode from up to 1939, I believe it was. We show that in more detail. And from 1955 to 1970, the register event was smaller and higher than current production. These earlier models considered to have the best sound of any of them, with the cost of a thinner, stuffy throat B flat, and also a little bit more quirky tuning of the 12ths. Monig had a reverse conical barrel that could help improve tuning for this. In 1970, the register vent was lowered and enlarged. This improved the throat B flat because it was closer to the keys, and larger became more venting for that note. And also, if you use some resonance fingering with the left and right, and the tonal quality was essentially more powerful because you had more venting available there. In the pictures here I have, we can see the flat spring on this key right here. And looking at the instrument itself, you can see it on the clarinet itself right down here. This one has the wings on the bridge key there. And of course, we know now the identifiers from the previous episode of pre-R13 identifiers versus R13 identifiers in relation to the trill key guide and the throat key posts. Now, there were a whole bunch of variations throughout the years. The Academy model came out, which was considered an R113 model. They were supposedly identical to the R13 with some minor defaults such as body or key scratch, but there's two errors of them. Here they're from the 38 to 41,000, designed with the lower joint a bit too large. If you ever watch videos of this, and we'll have videos of this later, you'll see that there's a manual process of sticking the clarinet into an arbor, and it cuts out the bore a little bit more, and I can easily guess they probably shoved it in too far and made it too big. Of course, rather than just throw it away, they worked to figure out how to fix that. Apparently there was a large batch of them, and of how to fix it, and of course how to sell it and stamp it with Academy on it. Now, there were some Academy models that did resemble the R13. Also, so you know, many Evette master models, Evette Schaeffer and Evette Schaeffer master models are Merlin stencils. Any of them with a preceding A, B, C, D, or E prefix is probably Merlin made clarinet. And any K series were usually buffet made during this time frame. I have more information on my web page under the Evette Schaeffer page about the K models and serial number ranges, and that'll be a different episode too. Now, one thing to look for if you have a buffet and you think it's an R13 or professional model is looking under the right hand pinky keys. If that's cut out there, then you know it went through the process as the other professional model clarinets did. Now, if we look here from the keywork, this R13 Academy model, we can see on the lower joint here, it says Academy model. Upper joint was also stamped Academy model right underneath the emblem. And of course, you know, it looks like a clarinet, you know, it's looks like an R13, but then you can say it looked like any other clarinet too. Unfortunately, in this picture, you cannot see underneath the crow's foot, see if it's cut out, but it was. Also, there's an Olds Opera, which was considered one of the very few buffet stencils. This Olds Opera was considered a stencil. If it truly is one of those serial numbers with shared throat, post keys, and everything you see here, you see a slotted trill key guide and shared throat keys on this particular one. And I have an example of a regular buffet one up above that we reviewed a few minutes ago, or it could have been in the previous episode. And this serial number is 485. So this was a pre-R13. Now my web page here, I had an Academy model and a regular buffet. The Academy model is serial number 42842 versus the regular buffet 42597. And basically, just go over this real quickly. You can read this more here. Is if you look at the tone holes, you'll see all of them are smaller on the Academy model. Just start with this first tone hole key here. Just look at them. They're all smaller, and they're all measured smaller too. I have another episode where I have measurements, a spreadsheet showing measurements of buffet clarinets, including the Academy models versus the R13. I recommend you take a look for that and see the size differences there. These are, of course, pre-R13 ones. There's share throat keys. And here's some examples of measurements. And what I was looking for here really was entry bore and exit bore. I mean, all the other numbers were wrong. We got the numbers below too. And the entry bore for the Academy model was larger, and the exit bore is larger. It's like, once again, they took the joint and shoved it too far up the mandrels that are cutting the bore. And they probably found that during the manufacturing process. I don't know the exact steps they did in manufacturing. I'm guessing they cut the tone holes after they cut the bore, because when you undercut the tone holes, of course, the bore has to be there. So I'm going to guess they found out they cut the joints too far, too deep, and so they made smaller tone holes so that it could tune properly, and stamped the Academy model. And here's another one from eBay from 2013, serial number 395. This one had actually model Evette Schaeffer. Once again, shared throat keys and everything. Now there's also, I put in here international. This is later on. This is a German-made buffet clarinet, of course, Schreiber. Now later on in the R13s in the 60s and 70s, now in the mid 60s, Buffet came out with a wide variety of clarinets, the S1, the Continentale, and the BC20. I have another episode about the S1 versus BC20 versus RC Prestige. Another video, actually multiple videos of those, versus the R13 also. Now the S1 supposedly was the Buffet, has jazzed up the clarinet. And the S1 apparently was an R13 with an inverse tapered barrel for a slightly brighter sound. And the register vent was located slightly higher too, also the same as the BC20, and that's shown in another video, the more definitions of that. The S1 also had less undercutting for the tone holes versus an R13. Here's an ad for that. Now we can't really read it right there. Now that Continentale, I've never had my hands on one before, so I really don't know what the differences are. But I'm going to guess it's from what I've heard, is more of a softer speaking clarinet. The BC20, I've had some BC20s. They're more powerful models. This was superseded by the RC models. And they have larger tone holes in the equivalent R13. Actually, I had those measured up now, and I can't remember what the results were. But the BC20 and the RC was a more powerful design clarinet than the regular R13. Its register event was a little bit higher with the S1. In 1974-75, Buffet transitioned away from the S1, the Continentale, and the BC20, and made a more modern lineup with the R13 and the RC. Some models in the UK showed up with a UK stamp on them, and one R13 apparently had a B prefix on it. Now, we do know that the F prefix clarinets were considered high pitch, and this apparently varied from 442 to 453, and were available usually in Europe or Australia. More information here from a friend of mine, Chris, in the UK, talking about B&H involvement in it, or some similarities to a BH clarinet. And the RC originally came out in 1975. I replaced a summer center tone with a RC Prestige. I thought it came out very nice and plays very well. The RC, of course, was named after Robert Carré. And supposedly the bore isn't very much different. It's supposedly easy response. The register event is up a little bit higher than standard R13. It does respond a little bit faster. I've actually found out my preferred mouthpiece for my RC is a standard symphony type mouthpiece, just to be generic here. And my preferred mouthpiece for an R13 is more of a jazz mouthpiece, which gives it a faster response. And they both play relatively the same and sound the same. With the same mouthpiece, though, I can tell the difference, and the RC is a bit more powerful, but playing a jazz mouthpiece on the regular R13 makes it more powerful too. So you can change things the way you want it. Here we have a DG standing for Daniel Galter, who developed this clarinet with a, I don't know how to say it, but kind of like a dugout ring inside the barrel. Now, of course, if you look at the RC Prestige, you see that in the bell and other Buffet R13 Prestige, I believe it is, it has a cutout in the bell too to help for projection and some intonation of the lower keys. Now, in here, I go over some other versions. You got the E13, which was a high-end Evette Schaeffer and Evette clarinet. E45, a C12, the Limite, which was a Brooks Mays Caldwell Music specific clarinet. This also had a K series before it, but also had a big Limite emblem on it. The E11 France, and this happened in 2012, I believe, when the Buffet Group bought Schreiber. At this point, all E11s were made by Schreiber, had made in Germany on it. E11s also had plastic tone holes. But with Buffet buying them, they started making the E11 France, and they had a lot of quality problems. And they basically shipped the production back to Germany, giving them time to fix everything. Of course, mentioned here, the E11s had plastic tone holes. And the E11A clarinets share the same design later ones, including the longer register vent. We can see up here. It's a screw in register vent. And look inside the clarinet itself. You see the register vent sticking way up into the bore. I did have an E11A clarinet. It's a very nice playing clarinet too. I prefer the earlier Schreiber clarinets, the ones before they went to the gold foil. They seemed to have better wood in them. That sounded a little bit more wide in the spectrum. There are also some clear E11s that were produced and also clear B12s. Also, I have in here in the Olds Opera and Linton, I think I had that earlier, about being stencils in the 60s and 70s. Later on, we have the Jazz Festival models, showing information about the bore of the Jazz Festival. So really a change in the barrel. This happened with the S1 too. Apparently the S1 had less undercutting and a different barrel design. Oh, that's right. I remember having one in the barrel. I mean, the bell was really light. The bell had no rings on it, just straight wood. The Jazz Festival, as I mentioned here. Inside, looking to the barrel. I mean, the bell. And here we have the Buffet Elite, which was in the 80s to 2002. This was a thin-walled body made of premium granadilla wood. Reinforcing rings were made of black polycarbonate fiber. Supposedly designed for chamber settings, not really orchestra or concert band settings. I have more keywork in here if you go to my website. It's a really interesting clarinet. Of course, you have the B12 and B12 brushed plastic versus polished. Here I've talked about Evette, the Greenline. You've probably seen these before. The R13 Vintage was a very nice sounding clarinet. The original Vintage, I believe they have a newer one now. This one is designed to the R13s in the 50s, except it had better intonation, much better keywork, and of course, modern built. And I really love the 1950s R13s, but the R13 Vintage is just a phenomenal clarinet. If you ever get a chance to buy one and want a darker sounding clarinet, it is the one to get. This, the R13 Vintage, also intonation is spot on across the board. I'd love to have one, but I have too many as it is. Here I have the Vintage clarinet. Was designed in 1996 by René Lassalle, master craftsman for research and development Buffet for over 40 years. And as I mentioned here, they wanted the same as their 1950s R13. Oh yes, I remember that here. I have the D, A, and C sharp, G sharp tone holes were raised. See, I have a picture of it right here. Here's an A1 with a C sharp, G sharp tone hole is raised up above the body. Now, as you know, because of the joint being cut here, they put this key or this tone hole in a particular place best they could. It actually should be where the tenon is, but we know from full bomb clarinets and enhanced bomb clarinets, that's not a very good place to put things. So they raised the tone hole a bit. And here we see a longer register vent coming out, but inside is still mostly flush to the body and curved to the body. I have additional information here about the R3 Prestige. We'll get to that in more newer models in a later episode. So once again, I want to thank you for listening today. Any questions or comments, please post them down below. Don't forget to give a thumbs up, like, share, and subscribe. You gotta love knowledge, gotta love life, gotta love clarinets. We'll see you next time.